I wanted to ask you, because you mentioned the wonder of the Ukrainian people, and you mentioned the diversity of the Ukrainian people. I'm wondering what was the most notable about how you were received by the Ukrainians?
They couldn't believe we had come. They said, "You're not for yourselves. You're not for yourselves," which is a famous line from Rabbi Hillel, if you know his work, where he says, if you are not for others, then who are you for? And they knew the Jewish scripture. I was so impressed with that. But they said, we can't believe that you would be so self-sacrificing and what this means to us. You are giving us so much encouragement and hope. You're lifting our spirits so much. And we said, no, you are the gift. You are the gift because you're standing strong against military aggression. Babyn Yar was obviously a very, very powerful place for me because I did lose all my relatives in the Holocaust in Europe. My father tried to trace the relatives who were rounded up. There were no traces of them through the International Committee of the Red Cross. But here I am with one of the top rabbis in Poland, a young man, Rabbi David, I love him. And we were saying the Hebrew prayers in English and Hebrew. And this young violinist played the music from Sarajevo that was played by the violinists while they were being bombed, and also by Leonard Cohen, Hallelujah, the beautiful song by Leonard Cohen. So these were some of the most powerful memories for me, and meeting all of the amazing top religious leaders in Ukraine. The rabbi in Kyiv, John Markovits, met with us, and the rabbi of, well, we also met with a rabbi near Częstochowa, Poland, but we met with over 3 rabbis and many imams, and the Catholic Archbishop of Ukraine. Oh my gosh, he was so funny and warm. And these encounters just touched our hearts so much. And they gave us great sustenance, and we gave them great sustenance too. So the Rabbi Jonathan Markovits, chief rabbi of Vienna, and the rabbi of Anatevka, Ukraine, which you might recognize that name from Fiddler on the Roof.
Yes, yes.
And Rabbi David. When you have 3 rabbis together, you have to call the question. This is a famous tradition in Judaism. So we asked, is Putin the Pharaoh? Is he trying to destroy the Jewish people and the people of Ukraine? Well, with Jewish leaders, you're always going to have contending points of view, because this is how we work through our difficulties in life, through debate and discussion and dissent and deliberation and deep thought. And so the first rabbi said, I think this war represents a struggle between good and evil, between democracy and authoritarianism. So it's larger than just Putin. And the second rabbi said, I want to go towards the light. I want to go towards goodness. I don't want to debate whether Putin is the Pharaoh or not. I think we have to uphold all that is good and decent that we're witnessing in Ukraine and in the world, and not just focus on the negative things that Putin is attempting to advance. And then, of course, the third rabbi had a different approach and said that you can't just focus on one man. You have to focus on the system that enables such despots to come to power. So adopt a more structural analysis and systemic analysis of the enablers, who is surrounding Putin and who facilitated this war. So we all thought deeply about this, and the imams and archbishops, and we all reflected and prayed together, because of course all of them are right. All of them were correct in this regard. So this stood out for me, and also meeting Rabbi John Markovits's wife was particularly meaningful for me. She said that the Jewish population in Ukraine has been devastated. Over 84% of the Jews have left Ukraine. The only ones who are behind there in Ukraine are the poor and the elderly who cannot afford to leave. So she's feeding 2,000 of them a week. And they're, of course, from all different faiths, all different religions. She's not just feeding Jewish people. And she couldn't believe we came either. She was so pleased and fortified that we were there. We also met people that were bombed out of their homes and had moved to a summer camp. And they were all living together in this facility. And I was particularly moved by a young 20-year-old man I met. He was so beautiful, and he had lost his father to the war in the Donbass when Putin invaded in 2014. And so he was growing up without a father, and then his house and his car that remained with he and his mom on the outskirts of Kyiv were also bombed. So he lost everything and was living there. And I sat down with him for a good 30 minutes and asked him about his mental health, asked him about what would he like me to tell the American public. And these are some of the things we witnessed in the bombings. And I'm just going to give your viewers a sense of the kinds of things we saw. And this was us walking through the remains of the cultural center. And I was with the leaders of the delegation, Alex Temkin from Poland. Here is Sister Sheila. I'm sorry she's not facing the camera, but the Vatican sent her to represent them. And Reverend May Elise Cannon walked in the rubble of the European Cultural Center near Kyiv, bombed by Russian forces. This was us looking in Babyn Yar in the ravine where so many Jewish people had been shot and killed. And we did get a lot of press coverage, as you know. This is my wonderful Imam Ibrahim, originally born in Africa from Indian descent, now with a big congregation in UK. But this is the kind of thing we witnessed when I was talking to the young boy. This is the kind of thing he lived through. And isn't that devastating to see the beautiful music being bombed out in this fashion?
So Professor Wien, what I'd like to ask, because a lot of people wonder, you're there, you know what you're offering to the Ukrainians. The question would be, what is it that the Ukrainians you met particularly want of the American people, the people who back in the United States? Could you please share their requests?
Well, first and foremost, they don't want us to be dictating the terms of any peace settlement. They need to be able to assert themselves. They have agency, they have will, and they are fiercely determined to defend democratic values and the interfaith nature of their country. And so that's first and foremost. They are not passive. They are not waiting to be rescued. They are not victims. They are fierce survivors. And I want the American public to know that. Number two, they want to be able to defend themselves. And I will say that my pacifism, my nonviolence orientation has been greatly challenged by this war. But I am trying to put my energies into strengthening all the nonviolent actors inside Russia. And that is another request that the Ukrainians have made. Please appeal to those people in Russia who are opposed to this war. And there are many of them. There are millions of them. And I would like to get into the details of that. The war is not popular in Russia. And people are afraid to speak out, and they're afraid to dissent. And so Ukrainians said, if you know of soldiers who don't want to come and commit atrocities in our country, if you know of intellectuals and scientists and academics and ballerinas and artists and poets and politicians and journalists and medical people who oppose this war, strengthen their capacity to stand up to Putin, fortify them and stiffen their spines so that we can end this war more quickly.
So, Professor Wien, what did you personally experience in reality in juxtaposition to the news we see on everyday TV?
Well, not all of Ukraine is bombed out. They were able to protect the hugest part of the country, all the central part and western part of Ukraine. It is in the east where much of the fighting is going on. But I will say that we did have air raid drills at night. We were, directed to bomb shelters if the trajectory of the missiles would have landed, gone astray and landed near us in the cities where we were. So we did have to be vigilant. And now we know what it's like for people in other countries who experience that kind of trauma. I was particularly moved by the humanitarian aid networks that I saw there. And what you're not hearing about are all the peaceful actions that people are taking. The United Nations is on the ground there. They are trying to do their best to negotiate humanitarian corridors. We also encountered the International Committee of the Red Cross. Nobody ever gives any media coverage to their efforts. We saw that they were in Mosul, they were in the steelworks, trying to evacuate women and children in that terrible bombing campaign by the Russians at the steel factory. We also learned of the work of the Nonviolent Peace Force, which has deployed all over the world into conflict zones to walk side by side with villagers so they don't get killed. And they act as unarmed bodyguards for human rights. They are very close to Odessa. And I also learned of hashtag Stop the War Now, which is an Italian anti-war organization that actually arrived in Ukraine in March with a 62-car caravan and hundreds of peace activists. And they arrived in Ukraine under Russian bombardment to try and stand in solidarity with the Ukrainian people. And they evacuated over 62 children whose parents begged them, please keep my children safe. And these Italian peace activists stood in line or waited in line on the Polish border, the Romanian border for days to get into Ukraine. And they were able to evacuate these kids. They're sending another delegation to Odessa to try and lift the blockade of the grain at the end of this month and well into early July. And we ourselves are sending many more delegations into Ukraine of world religious leaders.
So let me just interrupt you just a moment. For people who could not be part of the caravan this time around, because I understand that's really taking place maybe 3 days from now, and so that's a bit impossible for people hearing this now. But there is someone by the name of Alberto Capanini that people may be able to contact if they're interested in a future caravan. I have a feeling they're probably going to plan many more to show the camaraderie and the support for peace. And you can't do that, unless you can have a multitude of people come out to show their support. So for those people that may be interested in the next caravan, you can contact Alberto Capanini, Capanini, and his email is alberto.capanini@gmail.com. Again, alberto.capanini@gmail.com. So, Professor, let me ask you this. What do you feel was the greatest impact made by your team traveling in the Ukraine? Are there any other efforts that will be planned?
Yes. Our greatest impact was we demonstrated that it's possible to go. And we basically eased the way for other delegations. So now labor delegations have arrived from Brazil and across Europe. As you know, right after our departure, the heads of several European countries also arrived in Ukraine from various European countries. All of the heads of the EU are going. So we greased the skids, if you will, and we emboldened people to go, and we demonstrated that it was possible. But we also gave Ukrainians great hope, or so they told us, and encouragement for the long haul. And I do fear that the fighting may go on for a long time unless we can interrupt this cycle of violence and bring a halt to the Russian aggression, military aggression. So those were some of the big takeaways. I'm still reflecting on the meaning of the delegation, and we don't know what tiny seeds of peace we may have planted. You know, sometimes it takes months and even years to see the fruition of your efforts. But I'm also putting out the call to all peace activists through a national network of peace leaders and chapters across the United States, things like the International Fellowship of Reconciliation, National Peace Action, civil rights groups, environmental groups, peace groups. We're going to need all hands on deck to rebuild Ukraine as well.
So there are lots of people who come out in times like this. Yes, I know it's a horrible, horrible situation, but at the same time, I think it touches the heart of humanity, so that people all over the world who are tired of war, I mean, there has to be a better way to work our differences than always fighting and having violence. But it invites people, even individuals, sometimes to come, such as yourself, to join a team. I know that the World Consciousness Alliance has a gentleman named Santosh Govindraju, who actually went over representing the World Consciousness Alliance. And he went over to the Ukraine and took closets and storage rooms and turned them into showers to be able to help those people who were homeless, who didn't have a place to go or to take care of themselves. So there are wonderful people like that that are doing great things in the world. And what I'm hearing you say is that you want everybody who's listening to this particular podcast today to look within themselves and see, what are your skills? What are your skills? What are your gifts? What are your talents? What can you do to give back to humanity, such as you have, Professor? So what will you most remember and want to keep to inspire your teaching at the university?
Well, I will hold in my heart the plight and survival of all people suffering from war. And this needs to end. It's a barbaric institution, and nobody wants to live with it anymore, particularly not the soldiers. And I have veterans of Iraq and Afghan wars in my classes coming back to college on the GI Bill. And they say war doesn't make us safer. We have to end this, and we have to stop putting beautiful young people at risk and putting them in harm's way. It's just a moral outrage at some personal level to be willing to do violence to another society. And we have to end that practice and use peace building repertoires and strategies. But the other very important thing I took away from this trip was that Putin is trying to replace Ukrainians with purely white ethnic Russians. And this is a whole philosophy, it's a whole ideology called Ruski Mir. And he subscribes to this ideology that only purely white ethnic Russians can occupy the land. I came home to find some of these same philosophies in the United States. Of course, it's not the majority opinion, but this whole question of white supremacy and pure ethnic supremacy is just, it's disgusting and it's revolting to me. So racism in all its manifestations, no matter what country we find it in, must end. And young people give me great hope around this because they're marrying in record numbers interracially. They believe in pluralism and tolerance. I see it wherever I travel around the world. They are trying to stop gun violence. They're trying to stop racism. They're trying to stop the climate crisis. They're trying to build a more sustainable future. And those of us at my age have got to support them. So I took that when I was in Ukraine. I learned that Russians don't believe that Muslims, Jews, Christians should live together, and they want to end that. We cannot tolerate that. We cannot let that stand. We have to protect those that believe in a multicultural society at home here in the United States and abroad.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
We hope to go to Russia at some point and pray with those who are against the war as well. We do not want to demonize the ordinary Russian people. They are living under a very repressive regime and don't have a say in their government.
So let me ask you, in conclusion, what words of wisdom, this is beyond facts, this is what words of wisdom would you like to share to heal the minds and hearts of all concerned about the tragic circumstances that our Ukrainian brothers and sisters are facing?
The human race has great capacity for love and compassion, and that is what we need to nurture. That's what we need to teach in our schools. It's the highest form of emotional learning, which is empathy, the ability to identify with the suffering of others, and that we can forge a global, empathetic world civilization. It's already happening. It's unfolding before us. When there are earthquakes, when there are tsunamis, we see a global embrace. People rush to help. And we are building up a global peace network. So please keep the best of humanity in mind. As Mr. Rogers from Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood used to say, look for the helpers. Look for the helpers and the healers and go to them and join with them, not those who are spreading hate. And I invite everybody listening to this podcast to come and study with me at American University. We have one of the largest undergraduate peace studies programs in the country with 248 undergrads studying peace, ethics, and human rights, global security, and conflict resolution. And we have about 180 master's and PhD students. And we are just one of hundreds of peace studies programs in the world. We have 500 in Canada and the United States alone. That doesn't even count the rest of the world. So we are graduating tens of thousands of young people who have the skills, capacity, and wisdom to resolve conflicts without bloodshed.
Yeah, we need more people like you, Professor Wien. We really do. You know, it is inspiring to those who are listening to this podcast to hear how beautifully the interfaith team rose to the occasion to be able to come together and go into a war zone, to be able to pray and to change the energy and to talk about peace. And I'm reminded of a beautiful ayat that is in the Quran that my Muslim brothers and sisters have shared. It's called Table Spread 548. And I'm paraphrasing it. It says, each of you has your own holy books. Had God wanted, he would have created you one humanity, one community, but he did not, to test you. So vie then to live with one another and do good works. And I really think that that your interfaith team was actually following that by doing the good work of traveling and praying for peace. This was a powerful trip, and it's very important for people to viscerally understand the importance of this journey to the Ukraine, which you honestly helped us with today, Professor. So thank you so much for being with us today and giving us a window into the Ukraine at this challenging time, inspiring each of us to be a beacon of light, such as you have been, sending out into the ethers the important message that we are all connected and we are truly one human family. So thank you so much. I know, Professor, there are people listening today that would like to get in touch with you. And I wonder if it is possible for me to share your email in case they want to write to you. Would that be okay?
Sure.
Okay.
And that's WIEN@american.edu. That's W-I-E-N, like the city of Vienna. It means Wien.
Okay, wonderful. So thank you so much. I really appreciate you being with us today. I encourage you to encourage your students because it's the young people who are going to, we have to pass the torch to, who are going to continue with this amazing work of peace. I love that you call yourself a peace educator and you model for all of us the courage that it takes to be able to walk the talk and live the values that we talk about in all of our respective religions. So in closing, it seems that a new humanity is coming. So that's a positive thing to know because so many people have come out to do good things to be able to help with this particular situation in the Ukraine. I know that there are organizations helping, the Afghanistan refugees and refugees of many different countries. And so there is a togetherness in this cause for peace in the world and a unity, I would say. So may each of you who are listening today be empowered to be a change agent. Be who you are and shine your light, making a difference in the world. By being instruments of peace, love, and harmony, together, we can change the world. So let's do it, folks.
Ukraine's glory hasn't perished, nor did its freedom. Upon us, fellow kin, fate shall smile once more. Our enemies will vanish like dew in the sunlight, and we too shall rule, brothers, in a free land of our own. Our souls and bodies we will lay down for our freedom, and we'll show that we brothers are of the Cossack nation. Our souls and bodies we will lay down for our